I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, Colleen, who was in her 40s, worked overnights and needed a caretaker with medical experience to watch her mother during the night. When I say I once worked for them, I mean literally one night, and you're about to hear why I never went back. The 65-year-old woman's name was Martha, and her daughter's name was Colleen. It's possible Colleen didn't have any other family to watch Martha and didn't want to or couldn't afford to put her in a nursing home. Or maybe she felt more comfortable hiring someone with experience to watch over her. At the time, I was already a direct care worker for 2 other women with developmental disabilities, so I had experience, but nothing prepared me for that night. Colleen left for work earlier that day. I worked my first job, so I was pushing my body to exhaustion trying to make as much money as possible. Colleen introduced Martha and me. Martha gave me a smile before Colleen brought her upstairs to her bedroom for the night. It was around 9 p.m. Colleen told me that Martha sometimes walked around the house at night, acting confused, and I would need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. She specifically addressed this as not being sleepwalking when I asked. She said it was one of the symptoms of her mother's dementia. I assured her I'd know how to handle it. I spent my time in the living room catching up on my show. These jobs aren't super glamorous and involve a lot of sitting around. I heard footsteps from upstairs. I went to the stairway and looked up calling Martha's name and asking if she needed anything. She didn't answer. I heard her footsteps go back to her room and then the door closed. Maybe she went to the bathroom. I went back to the living room and watched some more TV. About an hour later, I got up to grab my sandwich from the fridge. As I left the kitchen with a plate and my sandwich to go back to the couch, I nearly had a heart attack and dropped the plate when I saw Martha standing at the doorway, glass shattered everywhere. I apologized to her and asked if she was okay. She started yelling at me, "Who are you?" I reminded her who I was, her direct care worker there to make sure she was okay. Everything she said was in a loud scream. "Why are you here?" "I don't know you." I reminded her that we had just met and that her daughter Colleen hired me to watch her in the house. This seemed to work long enough for me to get her to come back upstairs with me and to her room. I brought her a glass of water and some melatonin, making sure she took both before going back downstairs. After a few hours, I was absolutely exhausted. I needed a couple of hours of shut-eye. There was a spare bedroom upstairs with a twin-sized bed where Colleen said I could rest if needed. I felt like Martha was asleep for the night from the melatonin. I fell asleep within minutes, but I was only asleep for maybe an hour. I woke up to a sound from downstairs. It was a repeated slamming every 1 to 2 seconds. Something downstairs was being slammed. I jumped out of the bed. I had left the bedroom door open so that I'd hear anything if Martha got up. Case in point right here. When I got to the stairs, I realized the slamming was coming from the kitchen. I walked down the stairs as quickly as I could while remaining quiet. When I got to the bottom, I peered around the opening to the kitchen. What I saw was like a scene from a scary movie. Martha, in the darkness, was standing in front of the oven, repeatedly opening it and slamming it shut. It was horrifying. When I say I saw Martha, I really only saw her silhouette. It was that dark in the kitchen. I said Martha loudly, and she stopped, turned towards me, shut the oven door one final time, and started walking towards me, towards the stairs. I said in a now softer, scared-sounding voice, "Are you okay?" She got close enough to me where I could now see her facial features, and she looked at me with a blank expression. Then she walked right past me and started walking up the stairs. I followed her upstairs, but as soon as she got to her room, she slammed her door shut. I knocked on the door, saying, "Martha, are you all right?" She didn't respond. I quietly opened the door just to peek inside and saw Martha at the side of her bed, just standing, facing the wall. I've seen a lot, but this was some pretty unsettling behavior that I feel like you'd see in scary movies. I walked over to her and gently eased her into the bed. When she was lying down, I covered her and, for what I hoped would be the final time, said, "Good night, Martha," and shut her door. I went across the upstairs to the spare room and went back to bed. I purposely tried not to fall asleep for at least half an hour just in case she'd wake up again, but I don't even know if I made it that long. All I know is I fell asleep quickly. I woke up once again, much later. The room was still pitch black and the 1-hour alarm I set had not yet gone off. I looked around the room, wondering what woke me up. I didn't see anything until I heard a sound from inside the closet. I then noticed the cracked open closet door and the black shadow of a head peeking out of the closet. Again, I almost had a heart attack. I said, "Martha." She didn't answer. I kept saying Martha until she pushed the door open and started approaching the bed slowly. She started saying what she was saying hours ago again. "Who are you? I don't know you." As she got closer, I tried calming her down, reminding her who I was. I reached for the lamp next to the bed and fumbled with it until it turned on. Martha was holding a huge kitchen knife in her hand. At this moment, everything changed. Martha was now a threat to my life, and I had to worry about myself, not her. I screamed, "Martha, put the knife down!" My scream must have stressed her out because she got closer and started screaming back, still repeating, "I don't know you." I wasn't going to attempt to calm down a knife-wielding dementia patient. That was not in any job description. I mapped out a way to run around her in the bedroom and went for it. I jumped off the bed on the side further from her. She screamed again, "Who are you?" and swung the knife at the air as I ran past her. It was a slow and weak swipe from what I saw, but nonetheless showed she had intentions of actually using it. I got downstairs, grabbed my shoes, and went outside. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen, as she requested if there was an issue. I was courteous in doing this because getting law enforcement involved never does anyone any favors. Colleen was yelling into the phone at me not to leave her. I yelled back that her mother had attempted to kill me and that I didn't call the police. Colleen had to leave work. Of course, I stayed outside the house, making sure Martha didn't go anywhere until Colleen returned. When Colleen went inside, Martha was back in her bed, asleep. Colleen even accused me of exaggerating the whole thing until she found the knife next to Martha's bed. To avoid giving her any more fuel to blame me, I left out the fact that I ever went to sleep. But I felt I did nothing wrong. Colleen had offered me that room to sleep. I never worked in that house again. Martha was the scariest patient I've ever dealt with in my 9 years of being a direct care aide. Back in 2019, I worked for Domino's. It was my first night on the job. I was only working there to earn money for college supplies and my dorm expenses. That night, I was being trained. When you're being trained, you're accompanied by the manager on your first few deliveries to see how you do, evaluate you, and train you. It was late, around 8 p.m. when we got an order. Our store wasn't electronic like they are today. We had to look up locations on our phones for directions. The order was for 4 large pizzas and 2 bottles of Pib. We loaded them into my car since I was the one being evaluated. It was me, my manager, and another trainee I didn't know. The house we were heading to was way out in the middle of nowhere. My town was old, so it was common to go miles without seeing anything. It took us around 15 to 20 minutes to get there. The house looked really old and run down. The wood was chipping and some windows had boards on them. It wasn't a house you'd expect people to be living in. I asked my manager if we had to go up there, and he told us yes, but that he'd come with us and hand them the pizzas and sodas. Hesitantly, I got out of the car and noticed the other trainee was also nervous about walking to that front door. We finally started making our way to it when the other trainee said he thought he saw someone watching us from the furthest upstairs window. Our manager told him he was just paranoid and that this shouldn't take more than a minute or two, reminding us to stay calm and be nice. I don't know how I had the courage to ring the bell, but I did. Of course, it didn't work, so my manager pounded on the door. No answer. We waited about 15 seconds and knocked again, harder this time. Still no answer. We were all getting impatient and there was a smell of something rotten. We couldn't tell if it was the house or if something inside had died. Finally, after about a minute of waiting, someone opened the door but not completely. They opened it just enough to show part of their face and asked who we were and what we wanted. My manager said we had their pizza. The guy quickly unlocked the door and acted all friendly towards us. It freaked us out. He was an older gentleman, in his 50s at least. He told us it took him a while to open the door because it's hard for him to get around. Our manager handed him the receipt and asked if he was paying with cash or a check. The man said he'd be back with the money and left the front door open. I looked around and saw the house was empty. Completely empty. No furniture, just the floor and a couple of blankets. Obviously, this guy was homeless and just living there since no one else was. Then we heard footsteps coming from upstairs. More than one person. We got uncomfortable. The realization that someone was probably watching us as we walked to the front door hit us. My manager yelled out, asking if the man had the money yet, but there was no response. The footsteps stopped, and everything became silent. You could only hear the three of us breathing. My manager told us to stay at the front door in case the man came back, and he'd go around the house to see if the man needed help. We nodded and he walked towards the back. Then we heard footsteps, but not from upstairs. They were coming from below us. We both looked puzzled and uneasy. That's when we heard our manager scream and then frantic running. He ran to the front of the house where we were and told us to get back into the car. We left quickly. My manager explained that when he was walking around to the back, he saw a group of people in the darkness surrounding a small makeshift campfire. He got closer and noticed a baby deer in the middle. The group of men were sitting around, laughing at it as if they found it funny. The minute he said that, my heart almost stopped. The new guy and I quit right after, and I heard the manager quit a month later. I never worked a delivery job again. Obviously, we walked into some kind of cult meeting, and I'm just glad we left when we did.